This happened back in the summer of 2018. At that time, I used to work out with my two friends, Jared and Spencer. We had just graduated high school and would go to the gym every morning together and work out. Sometimes we would hang out afterwards or get food. I remember that Jared kept saying he really liked Costco's pizza and he wanted us to try it. Personally, I didn't think it would be all that great, and I didn't even have a Costco membership, but I was willing to try it. One day after the gym, Jared convinced us to go. Spencer and I were both hesitant, but we figured why not go with. As it turns out, when we got there, Jared didn't have a Costco membership either. He told us that all the times he had gone before, he had been able to sneak in without anybody stopping him and asking him for a membership card. The store looked pretty busy, so we all decided to try to walk in behind somebody else and hope that nobody would notice or care. We went inside behind several people and were able to make it in okay. We walked over towards the food area where they sold the pizza and other food like ice cream and hot dogs. But before we could get in line to order, a man approached us. He was a younger-looking man who worked at Costco and asked to see our membership cards. At that point, we all came clean and told the man that none of us had memberships, but were just hoping to get a pizza. The man told us that we couldn't do that without a membership, but said he could offer us a daily pass to each of us that we could use. I wanted to just leave, but we all decided to follow the man to get our passes. He led us towards the side of the store and through a doorway leading to the back room. There was a hallway that we walked down from there, and then he led us into this weird type of back room. The lights were off inside the room, but the man told us to go inside. As we did, the man turned the lights on, and when the lights came on, it revealed about 5 large, scary-looking men inside the room, all staring at us with ski masks covering their heads. They were not wearing Costco clothes or even any type of work clothes. We all turned to the door, but the original man stood there with his arms out as if he was going to block us. One of the men told us to do as they say. Jared turned and ran at the man blocking the doorway immediately and actually knocked him down. I followed, and then Spencer ran behind me. We all ran past the man and back out the hallway. Finally, we made it inside Costco again, where there were other shoppers and we felt more safe. We then looked back but didn't see any of the men, so we decided to just leave without getting a Costco pizza or anything. It was just so weird what had happened, and I have no idea what those men wanted from us. We never reported it or anything like that either. I used to shop at Costco all the time. As a mother of 3 children, all under 10 years old, we go through a lot of food in our household. One night, I was shopping for some groceries like I often would. It was a quiet night at Costco, and not very many other people were there at all. As I was passing through one of the aisles, I came across some crates. I noticed that behind some of the crates, I could just barely see a man hiding behind them. I thought it was a funny joke because I had seen some videos where people would hide in stores like Walmart between the aisles, so I ignored the man and kept going. I was in the store for quite a while longer, and as I was on the opposite end of the store, I just barely noticed the man again. He was once again hiding behind some crates, and this time, I caught him staring right at me. I ignored it again and kept on going, but I suddenly felt a little bit creeped out. I didn't really get a look at the man at all because he was hunched over and hiding behind crates, but he seemed pretty average. As I finished up getting things, I couldn't help but start looking over my shoulder a little bit. It was just really strange to see a man hiding and looking at me 2 different times. I got the last of my several items on my list and then started towards the front of the store to check out. As I did, I glanced behind me and noticed the man was there once again. He and I were the only people in the aisle, and the man appeared to be walking right behind me about 10 feet back. He was also just staring right at me, and when I looked at him, he didn't even pretend to be looking at something else. He just remained staring at me. I was about to ask the man why he had been following me, when he suddenly turned and ran in the opposite direction, and out of the aisle that we were in. At that point, I was just so happy that he left me alone, that I began to walk quickly to the checkout to leave Costco. It took me maybe 30 seconds to get to the check lanes, but as soon as I got there, I heard a commotion and some noise coming from about 30 feet away near one of the aisles. I saw the man who had been following me literally fighting with another man and throwing him to the ground. I watched as the man then got up after wrestling with the other man and ran away once again. He got out of sight, and there wasn't many people in the store at all, but I heard somebody in the distance yell to call the police. I got out my phone and then ran outside, leaving my cart full of groceries. It didn't take long at all for the police to arrive, and I waited outside as they got the man out of the store. The man was basically crazy and tried to attack 2 people before attempting to run away. If I hadn't turned around and caught the man following me, who knows if he would have attacked me as well. This story happened a few years ago. I was on my way home when my friend John called me and asked if I could pick him up some food from Chipotle. John lived in my same apartment building, so we would occasionally get food for each other and stuff. We also happened to be pretty good friends. I said sure because it was on my way home, but when I got to Chipotle, I realized that it was closed. The Chipotle was very close to a Costco and was sort of in the same parking lot. I drove into the Costco parking lot, which was also empty, and checked on my phone. Both places were closed, so I texted John to tell him that they were closed and asked him if he wanted me to pick him up something else. As I sat in the empty Costco parking lot waiting for a response, I noticed another car driving into the parking lot and pulling up next to me. I looked over, wondering why in the whole entire empty parking lot someone would park right next to me. I didn't recognize the car, and it didn't look like a police car or anything like that. When I looked over, the windows were tinted so I couldn't see inside. Then another car pulled in shortly after, followed by several more. The cars all parked next to me or very close to me, and in total there had to be close to 10 of them. At this point, I was feeling really confused and even slightly concerned. All the cars remained running, and finally, I saw a door open up. I noticed a man get out. He had on a cap and sunglasses. He walked right up to the passenger side of my car, and then I noticed another man get out of his car and aggressively walk towards my driver's side. The man at the passenger's window knocked on my door, and I slightly rolled down the window just a crack. As soon as it was open, the man reached his hand in as far as he could, and then tried to push the window down the rest of the way. I knew at this point that I was in trouble, and clicked to roll it back up. That's when the man quickly reached his hand out of the window and banged it on it really hard. I had enough at this point and put my car into reverse and started to back away. When this happened, the men raced back to their cars, but at the same time, I noticed another car start to drive towards the parking lot. All within about 10 seconds, all of the men had returned to their cars, and all of the cars drove off out of the parking lot in all different directions, leaving me alone. Just like that, they were all gone, and I was just sitting there in the middle of the Costco parking lot, all by myself. I was pretty freaked out, and decided just to drive home. Luckily, I wasn't followed or anything like that, but I don't understand who those people were, or what they wanted from me.
After work, I like to go with co-workers to Waffle House sometimes. It's fun, relaxing, and relatively cheap. However, tonight I decided to go out with a couple of girls I work with. I don't have a vagina myself, but since we all closed up together, we thought we would go grab something to eat. So while we're eating, I'm facing the door, and in walk these 2 drugged-out looking people, which isn't uncommon for Waffle House. But something about these 2 people in hoodies in the middle of summer in Texas really put me on edge. The 2 girls I was with were both pretty attractive, and the 2 guys also took note as they walked past. I've been in a couple of sticky situations and can always tell when shit is about to go down, and these guys gave off that vibe like no other. They sat behind me where I couldn't see them in any reflection. It was nerve-wracking. A few minutes went by before I realized that it was just our 2 groups in the restaurant. I glanced over my shoulder and saw they weren't eating anything, just drinking and staring at us. Fuck. I told the 2 girls I was with that we should try to hurry up and go because I was tired, trying not to freak them out, because assholes like those guys feed on fear. We got up, and I look over at them. They were still watching us with empty drinks now. At this point, I should say 2 things. I have an injured knee right now from practice that causes me to limp a little, and I train in Muay Thai boxing and compete internationally in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I am not one to be fucked with, but the limp definitely gives off the impression that I would be easy to overpower. So as we were paying, I noticed one of the guys point at me and make a stabbing motion, and the other guy smiled, and they both stood up and walked towards us. One of the girls I was with was making sexual passes at me, which were very visual. I told her to stop as these guys got closer, and I saw one lick his lips as the other held one hand in his pocket. I told the hostess to keep the change and hurried the girls outside while trying to hide my limp as best I could. We got to the parking lot, and I told one girl to go to her car and gave the other the keys to my car and told them to hurry up and get in since I couldn't run with my limp and that I would explain later. The guys came out as I was getting in my car, and I saw one of them pulling something out of his pocket and heard him yell something I couldn't make out over the sound of us noping the fuck out of there. I texted the girl who I wasn't taking home and explained the situation and why I was acting weird. I hate to think about what could have happened if I had not been paying attention to my surroundings. Bad shit almost went down because of, I'm assuming, crackheads at Waffle House. This story is from a female's perspective. To preface, I was about 25 years old when this happened. My boyfriend and I had been out visiting with friends, and we left their house late, around 2 a.m. Now, I've never been much of a drinker. I was addicted to opiates at the time, but that's neither here nor there, so I did the driving. On our way back, we decided to call in some omelets from the Waffle House, which is the only place where we can get takeout in the super early morning. We arrived at the Waffle House and I went inside to pick up our orders. As I was paying for the order, a young man to my left began pacing and mumbling angrily, muttering something I couldn't understand. I didn't really think much of it, since most diner patrons are either drunk or truck drivers at that time of day. When I collected the food and turned to leave, I noticed a young woman outside of the diner. She too was angrily pacing back and forth, grimacing and cursing. The young man followed me out into the parking lot. I sidestepped the woman to get to my car. The young man had gotten into another car, and the young woman sat in the passenger seat. Whatever, I thought. Tweakers. The car with the two tweakers screeched to a halt behind my car, pinning us to the parking spot. Within seconds, the man was knocking ferociously on my driver's side window and yelling at me. My boyfriend and I exchanged what the fuck glances, and I rolled down my car window about an inch. The conversation went something like this. "You stole my girlfriend's wallet, and you better give it fucking back right the fuck now." I have no idea what you're talking about. I have my own wallet, that's it. "You fucking stole it from the counter, and we're getting it back, one fucking way or another." "Dude, I didn't steal shit. Move your car or I'm going to back into it." "You give it to me right now, or give me yours or you're fucking dead." I rolled up the window and backed my car up a few inches. He continued to scream at me through the window, then leapt back into his car with his girlfriend. They peeled backwards and exited the parking lot. At that point, my boyfriend and I were amused more than anything else, and we re-entered the highway. Just then, we heard the same car roar up behind us. The man was driving like an absolute maniac to dodge other cars, traffic lights, and stop signs, until he got so close to us that their car nearly rammed into our back bumper. I weaved in and out of the sparse traffic as safely as I could in an attempt to throw them off our route. Each time, he managed to pull up behind us again. He clicked his brights on and off and leaned on his horn. Inside our car, it was blinding and deafening. I sure as hell wasn't going home so that these tweaked, unhinged people would know where I lived. I swear it was almost like I could still hear him screaming, even over the blaring car horn. My boyfriend and I didn't do much talking, as I suppose we were both shocked and trying to figure out what to do. "Fuck this," I told him. "We're going to the police station." I doubled back, the car still bearing down on us. When I pulled into the police station, they followed. I locked my car doors. I picked up my cell phone and began to ring the station, because I sure as shit wasn't going to get out of my car. The man practically ran out of his car up to my window, again, banging and yelling. At this point, I had gone way beyond concerned and scared to absolutely pissed. "I'm on the phone with the cops right now." If you don't have it, I guess you don't have it." He then sprinted back to his car with his sour-faced girlfriend and burnt rubber out of there. I stayed in the police station parking lot for a while, talking to the cops on duty. When we finally left at about 3:30 a.m., I still made several loops through our town before eventually heading home, arriving after 4 a.m. Legally, nothing came of the incident. I had no idea what the couple's names were, nor did I get a license plate number. We gave the cops descriptions of their physical appearances and vehicle, but they seemed far more interested in making sure I wasn't drunk. Thanks, fellas. I'm fairly certain that the maniac couple was pulling a strong-armed con job, or they were actually convinced that I'd mysteriously and magically stolen the girl's wallet, even though they were pacing and muttering as soon as I'd entered the diner, and even before I paid for the takeout, and that methamphetamine psychosis was responsible for the bizarre severity of their behavior. Anyway, fuck those assholes. My omelets were cold and rubbery by the time I got home. So a few years ago, I used to work at the Waffle House in a college town, so weird people aren't really that unusual. To start off, there are only two 24-hour restaurants there, and I used to work third shift at the Waffle House. Sometimes, when a person's car would break down, the police would drop them off at one of these two places. They weren't supposed to, so they would drop them off within walking distance, but not actually outside, like some shitty loophole. So one night I was working with a cook and another waitress. We'll call them Mark and Cassie. Around 11 p.m., this old guy wanders into the lobby with a little bag. First off, we usually don't get older people after around 8 or so at the latest. Second off, this dude is creepy as fuck. He starts off with telling us about how his car broke down on the highway, and the police dropped him off in the parking lot next door. I felt bad for him because it's the middle of the night, and he's not from around here, and he has no money. So I pour him some coffee free of charge. My coworkers are usually on drugs, so I assume free coffee isn't going to get me fired. This is when the guy just starts talking my ear off. I can barely get in a word edgewise, which is difficult since I'm usually the talker. He talks about what happened to him, and then starts trying to sell the tools he has with him in his bag. Of course we say no, but he just keeps asking about it. He also starts wandering in and out of the store. The first time he does, Mark, who's ex-military, searches his bag to make sure he doesn't have any weapons, because he's starting to raise some eyebrows. There was nothing but tools, so we start to feel a bit safer. When he comes back in, I keep talking to him. Mark and Cassie note the fuck away to the other side of the store and watch. Keep in mind, this guy is literally the only person here. We don't start getting people until 1:30, when everyone leaves the bars. Now he's starting to talk about a lot of weird things. I tell him I'm interested in studying prisons, and he tells me the best way to do so is to get arrested. He then starts talking about how he used to be in prison, but he never says why. He starts to make us really nervous, so I start to draw him in case the dude decides to murder us. We'll have something because I'm good at drawing things I can see. There's a low little wall where we usually write out customer receipts, so I can draw him without him noticing. Not that that matters since he's looking straight ahead while he talks to me. We start getting customers because it's about 1 a.m. The bars let out at 1, so anyone who drives gets there shortly after, while those who walk get there about 30 minutes later. And this guy keeps talking no matter where I am. He doesn't raise his voice or anything. He just keeps talking at the same level, even when I walk away to take care of other customers. At this point, I'm starting to think this guy is schizophrenic. I'm a psych major, so I mean actual schizophrenia, and not just crazy. And at this point, wanting to get away, but I really can't because I'm afraid he might do something. He does, but not what I was afraid of. He starts just insulting customers. He tells one kid that he's fat, and starts asking him why he's so fat, and tells him he needs to lose weight. He then talks to a family of travelers and says,
"Your wife and kids are fine, but why are you so ugly?"
We decide he has to go. Mark tells him he has to leave, as we've warned him several times to leave the other customers alone. So Mark tells him to leave, or we're going to call the cops. The guy starts yelling at us and glares at me and asks why he should leave, but he finally just does after a while. But he comes back at half an hour later, and we have to kick him out again for harassing customers. He doesn't come back that night, so we decide he must have found a way home or contacted someone. So I finish around 7 a.m. and walk home. I live above the bars downtown, so it's a 30-minute walk, but along the way, I see the old guy. I dart behind a building and take the long way home. I don't think much of it because it's a small town and there's not a lot of places to go. I have to work again the next day, so I go home, sleep, get all my chores done, being an adult as usual. So about an hour before work, Waffle House calls me, and my coworker Kevin tells me the same old guy has been coming around several times during the day, every couple of hours looking for me. I'm a 23-year-old female, so they're worried about what he wants. I call my friend Jason and tell him why I need a ride, and he brings me in. I ask what's been going on, and apparently this guy has been in at least 10 times asking to talk to me. He never says why, so I'm on edge, waiting because I have no idea what this guy wants. Is this a 60-year-old guy pissed off because I didn't defend him when he was kicked out? Is he asking because I told him my name? Or is it something else? Surprisingly, for the first few hours of my shift, we didn't see him, but he eventually comes in and ignores me. I'm super confused, but I keep an eye on him again. I've also brought pepper spray. Before long though, we kick him out again for harassing customers. This is all very confusing for me. He's been asking for me all day and then ignores me when he comes in. But after we kick him out, he does not come back. When my shift ends, my friend asked me if I need a ride home. I tell him no. This guy has left and hasn't come back, so I'm good. Well, that's what I thought, until I saw him walking towards me after work. He yells out for me and starts coming at me, but I run inside a building that I know has another exit. I sneak out the other way before this guy can find me, and thanking every god I can think of that I know the small town better than him. I still have no idea what he wants, but I'm not taking any chances. I sneak home through some back ways. I call work and let them know what happened, and asked for the next few days off. They agree, and later tell me the old guy kept coming in for the next few days, and they finally called the police, and they took him away.
The names and locations in this post will be changed in order to preserve the privacy of those involved, and to avoid any further pain associated with the incident. Some will believe this is a cop-out, but unless you were there when it happened, you'll never be able to understand how something like this can destroy a person's ability to move on with their life and have a meaningful future. When the time came for me to go off to college, my mother insisted I live in the dorms for at least my first 2 years. She said this was an essential part of the college experience and the friendships I made would last forever. I didn't bother to remind her that none of her friends from school still contacted her. It was more likely one of those greatest days of our lives sentiments that you see in movies like St. Elmo's Fire. After all, she was about that age. I attempted to get the idea across that it was not like her and didn't get along with other girls, but she quickly poo-pooed the idea and accused me of being a prima donna. Like usual, her desire to relive her sorority days through me left me with no say in my living situation, and I found myself living in a musty old building with a bunch of hyperactive brain-dead girls. My first day at the dorms, I met my roommate. For the sake of this story, I'll call her Sybil. She was a quiet, shy, and cute little girl that said very little, so thankfully she wasn't as bad as I feared. I made it clear to her from the start that I was here to learn and get my degree, so I could start living my real life and was in no way interested in partying and chasing frat boys. She simply said, "Okay." And with that simple one-word answer, I knew we were going to get along just fine. School was almost exactly what I expected it to be. Juiced-up pretty boys and overly aggressive feminists complaining about everything under the sun. I did my best to block out all this chaos and focus on my studies. As far as I could tell, Sybil was trying to do the same. She did voice her concerns the first week of classes, saying they were harder than she expected, but didn't say anything else about the subject again. Other than when I returned to our room at night to sleep, I saw very little of her the first month or so. The loud cheeriness of the other girls drove me to do my studies in the library, a place I soon fell in love with. When semester tests ended, I was free to spend more time in our room and talk to Sybil about her school experience so far. The girl I had met a couple of months ago was very different from the one sitting across from me then. The stress of school was obviously affecting her psychologically. As I talked to her, she would mindlessly twirl and pull her hair out from the root. Every other sentence lacked any sense, and as she spoke, she grew more and more uneasy. I mentioned my concern for her, but she acted as if she didn't hear and continued her agitated rambling. Tomorrow, everyone would be going home for the Christmas break, and I convinced myself once she returned home, her health would improve, or at least her parents would get her the help she needed. Despite feeling guilty about leaving her alone, I had a few things I had to get done before I flew home in the morning. Returning to our room an hour later, I was relieved to see Sybil asleep in bed. Doing the best I could not to wake her, I finished packing my luggage and soon turned in myself. I'm not sure how long I had been asleep when I was awakened by a banging noise across the room from me. Once I was able to open my eyes and comprehend what was happening, I saw a dark figure on Sybil's side of the room, picking up suitcases and folding clothes. Turning on my bedside lamp, I quietly asked her what she was doing. "I'm packing for my trip, honey. Go back to sleep. Sorry I woke you." This made no sense to me. We had plenty of time to get ready in the morning before we had to be out of the dorms. I initially thought I had overslept or something, but the time on my clock said 3:23 a.m. "Are you having a hard time sleeping or something? You can do that crap in the morning." Once again, she ignored what I said and continued to pack. Picking up her large suitcase, she placed it on her bed and took her smaller one from the floor by her feet and stacked on top of the other. When I saw this, I became more confused. Sitting up in bed, I started to ask her again what she was doing, but before I said a single word, she turned to face the window. I couldn't do anything but scream, loudly and over. I watched as the color drained from her. When the paramedics arrived about 10 minutes later, they pronounced her dead. At some point, a couple of the girls in the dorm walked me out of our room and sat me down on a chair in the hall. The rest of the night and into the next morning, I remained in a state of shock. The school brought in grief counselors that morning to talk to everyone. Many of the girls did, but I stayed in a stupor until my parents flew out to escort me home that afternoon. I'm thankful to all the girls on our floor that helped me and contacted my family and explained the circumstances to them. I had grossly misjudged many of them, and for that I'll always be sorry. My mother had proved correct. At least in this case, I was being a prima donna. The afternoon before my parents and I flew home, I had to speak with the detectives investigating this. I did my best to describe what had happened, despite how hard it was. They did want me to know that I shouldn't feel responsible for it. Her parents had told them that Sybil had said many times on phone calls that she was homesick and was having a hard time with her studies. She was from a small town in Missouri, and going off to school had been a massive dose of culture shock. Add that to the fact that she was failing most of her classes, the pressure must have all boiled over. Regardless of what the detectives and my parents were telling me, I couldn't help but feel a large amount of complicity in her death. I had spent so much time worrying about myself and ignoring the actions of others that I missed her slow descent into illness. I'm not sure if she had needed someone to talk to, I would have been the right person. My smug attitude towards the others I shared the campus with had made me a miserable bore. When the time came, I chose not to attend the funeral. I was sure the last person her parents would want there was the roommate that ignored their daughter's illness and had not even bothered to mention her strange behavior to anyone. I made the excuse to my parents that Missouri was too far away, but that was the truth of why I didn't go. The idea of returning to that particular school was beyond possible. The thought of all the accusatory looks and glares was too much to handle. I decided to take some time off and deal with what had happened. The next 6 months was spent in counseling, in group and solo. This helped me deal with my guilt surrounding the event and overall improve my attitude towards others. 3 years later, I'm in my final year of college at a small local university just a short drive from my parents' house. All this time later, my mother has begun to accept that I'm my own person, and I have come to the realization that I was far too immature to move across the country and go to a huge college filled with strangers. The bad attitude I had towards others was a self-defense mechanism to hide my insecurity and fear of being so far away from home and those I loved.